Good evening, Rowan. It's the 22nd of December 2015 and it's about 11:30. And one of the reasons that I'm making this video for you this evening is because I realised I'd forgotten to reassure you I hadn't been seducing any priests over the weekend on Sunday. And I wouldn't want you to think I've forgotten about you either. Anyway, you ought to be very grateful I'm making this video this evening because I've had quite a busy day doing a lot of baking, icing my Christmas cake, and then I had to have a rest and all this kind of thing, and I'm still finding time to make you this wonderful video this evening, so I'm sure you'll be very grateful about that. Anyway, I'm going to make a few more comments about the unusual lecture you gave at St Paul's Cathedral. Well, it wasn't unusual for you really, but unusual in the general scheme of things. I think that's what I'd say. Even though you've written an even more bizarre article about Christmas since then, which was published today. I might comment on that tomorrow. It would be a shame though not to say some more about this lovely lecture that you gave at St Paul's Cathedral. So here goes. So here's what you say. What we celebrate at Christmas is not the birth of a particularly sweet and harmless baby, nor even the welcome possibility of having a few extra drinks in the middle of winter. We celebrate a set of discoveries about God and about humanity, or as Christians regularly said, not so much discoveries as revelations. We are shown something about God, that the God we believe in is not a God who has to be lured down from heaven by being very, very polite to him or behaving extra well. We are dealing with a God who can't help himself, overflowing, boiling over into the world that he has made, a God who cannot give less than the life that is the divine life. Well, the first thing I'd like to say about this really is, you've got a very unusual style talking about God for someone who is supposed to be a Christian. Why do you say things like, the God we believe in? And you haven't said it in this part of this lecture, but you say things like, the Jesus of the Gospels. Well, what other Jesus is there? There isn't another Jesus. For Christians, there isn't another Jesus apart from the Jesus of the Gospels. That is Jesus. So why do you talk about the Jesus of the Gospels as if there's another one? As if you're just performing some kind of literary criticism and you're not actually speaking about a real person who you're supposed to believe in as the Son of God and God incarnate and the Saviour of the world and this kind of thing. The majority of people on earth don't believe that. But they're not claiming to be Christians, are they? They're not the Archbishop of Canterbury. So why are you talking in this way about God, as if he doesn't really exist? The God we believe in. Well, which God would that be then? The actual God or an imaginary God? What are you talking about? The second thing to say is that you framed your argument in an unusual way as well. And I'd say the same about this as I said about what you said about Teresa of Avila, that it's quite hard to address the points that you make because your underlying assumptions are incorrect. You talk about God who has to be lured down from heaven by being very, very polite to him or behaving extra well. Well, this is just complete nonsense. God doesn't have to be lured down from heaven. Nobody's saying that God has to be lured down from heaven, though I'm quite sure you're implying that that's the kind of thing I've been arguing. But it isn't at all. Now, you're either being deliberately stupid or you really are stupid and you just don't understand the importance of moral behaviour and virtue, which you always try to marginalise, or you ignore it altogether, or you condemn people who bring it up. Well, particularly me. Because you want to make out like I'm some kind of moral fanatic or something like that. And that I'm just being very harsh and horrible to you and demanding and all this kind of thing. This is what you're trying to make out. Or you're trying to make me think that I'm behaving that way, which just isn't true at all. But the point is, if you really believed in God, if you had any love of God, then you'd want to behave in a moral way, you'd want to develop virtue, because these things are pleasing to God. And if you think about a human relationship, well, you probably find this very difficult being a psychopath, because you only see other people as giving or withholding. But for the majority of people, when they have a relationship with another human being, whether it's their husband or wife or children or other members of their family or friends or whoever it is, if they love those people, then they want to act in a way that pleases them. That's the way that you act towards people that you love. And it's the same if you have a relationship with God as well, that you want to behave in a way that pleases Him. And if you think back to the image that St. Teresa used about the garden and about the levels of prayer being like different methods of watering a garden, well, she first described the garden, which represents the soul. She described the garden and she said that God comes into it and uproots weeds and plants fragrant herbs, which represent the virtues, and the weeds represent vices. And it's our job to water the garden and develop these virtues, which she uses fragrant herbs to represent these virtues. And the purpose of this in the spiritual life is that God will come more into the garden, because He finds the aroma of these fragrant herbs pleasing, and the fragrant herbs are virtues. So in relation to God, this is the purpose of developing virtue and of moral behaviour, because it's pleasing to Him, and someone who loves Him wants to be pleasing to Him and wants Him to come into the garden, which represents the soul. So it's not a question of, well, I've got to lure Him down from heaven. It's more a question of, well, He's someone I love and I want to be pleasing to Him, so He'll want to spend more time with me. That's a bit a silly thing to say in relation to God, because you can't really get away from God. But that's the gist of it, really. It's not like, oh, well, I've got to be super polite and I'm gritting my teeth just so God will come out of heaven. If you think it's like that, then you completely do lally. We are dealing, in other words, with a God who doesn't have to be persuaded to be interested in us. Well, who said that He did? Who said that God had to be persuaded to be interested in us? I've never heard anyone say that. It's quite a bizarre thing to say. And one way of keeping a Christian Christmas might be to look what relics there are in our minds and hearts that still believes that God is essentially rather bored with us, rather removed from us, and always in need of being kept sweet. Well, is that what you're saying is in your mind and heart? Because it isn't in mine. You're implying that you're speaking for everybody, but there's actually no evidence of that, is there? However long you've been a Christian, or however long you've been looking wistfully at Christianity from the outside, Well, why would anyone need to look at Christianity wistfully from the outside when they could just become a Christian? Anybody can become a Christian. That's something which keeps obstinately coming back. I speak as a sinner to sinners, you understand. Well, this lecture at St Paul's Cathedral you gave the day after I commented on your blockbuster of a lecture at the British Academy, where you acted in a way that proved what I said about you was right, that you always avoid reference to virtue and moral values. But unfortunately, in this statement, I speak as a sinner to sinners, you understand, you've proved something else that I said about you, because I said, when people criticise you, the first thing you do is you say, you're projecting. And if that doesn't shut you up, you then say, oh yes, well I am that bad, but you're just as bad as me. Now I have said that you said that previously, and here you are doing it again. I speak as a sinner to sinners, you understand. So why didn't you just say I speak as a sinner, then? Why did you have to lump everyone else in with you? Now it is true that everyone has sinned and fallen short of the glory of God, as we're told in the New Testament. But then on the other hand, were the majority of people in that congregation, in that listening to that lecture, were they all working for the globalists then? Were they providing propaganda for 9/11 that's led to over 1 million deaths? Were they hounding people round from city to city, doing everything they could to destroy them, slandering them behind their back, trying to screw their ordinance, driving people to suicide, and being paid £750,000 to preach the gospel and take care of the Church of England, while all along having the subversive agenda of trying to destroy Christianity and bring down Western civilization? I think probably not, Rowan. So to say I speak as a sinner to sinners, it's just completely laughable, it really is. Apart from the fact that you've proved something else I said about you. That's deeply etched in our minds, the mythology of a God who somehow has to be persuaded to be on our side. Well, it's not deeply etched in my mind. This must be the royal we. You've got the authority to make infallible declarations on behalf of everybody else on the basis of no evidence whatsoever.
What we celebrate at Christmas is not the birth of a particularly sweet and harmless baby, nor even the welcome possibility of having a few extra drinks in the middle of winter. We celebrate a set of discoveries about God and about humanity. Or, as Christians have regularly said, not so much discoveries as revelations. We are shown something about God. That the God we believe in is not a God who has to be lured down from heaven by being very, very polite to him or behaving extra well. We are dealing with a God who can't help himself overflowing, boiling over into the world that he has made. A God who cannot give less than the life that is the divine life. We're dealing, in other words, with a God who doesn't have to be persuaded to be interested in us. And that's quite a good start. And one way of keeping a Christian Christmas might be to look at what relics there are in our minds and hearts of an approach to God which still believes that God is essentially rather bored with us, rather removed from us, and always in need of being kept sweet. However long you've been a Christian, or however long you've been looking wistfully at Christianity from outside, that's something which keeps obstinately coming back. I speak as a sinner to sinners, you understand. That's deeply etched in our minds. The mythology of a God who somehow has to be persuaded to be on our side. You might as well try to persuade a waterfall to be wet. But there's more. The way in which that overflow impacts upon us is not by force or command. It's by a solidarity, an identification so deep, so serious and total, that we can only say when we see Jesus, we see God, and we see, therefore, a God who values our humanity beyond all imagining.
So you go on to say, so the second question about how we keep a Christian Christmas is to ask some awkward questions about how we value human lives, how we value the lives immediately around us, how we value the lives that impact on us in negative, dangerous and difficult ways. What you mean, like your life impacts on mine, and your life impacts on all those dead Iraqis and Afghanis and so on. How we value the lives that appear not to be especially significant or effective or efficient. You emphasised efficient. Which made me think you're trying to take the moral high ground again. That's because you're insane. If we take seriously what these carols say, we ought to be looking with speechless amazement at every human face. Well, I could look in speechless amazement at your face, because I just can't believe all the crap you come out with. But you know, worshipping human beings in general is a doctrine of Satanism. It's not a Christian doctrine. We don't worship human beings. That's the first lie in the Garden of Eden, isn't it? You can be like God if you eat from the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. This is how Satan tempted Eve. So that's the oldest lie in the book, you can be like God. Quite literally the oldest lie in the book. And knowledge of good and evil just doesn't mean you know about it, it means you know it in the sense that you're doing it, you're involved in it. It doesn't mean that a kind of abstract intellectual knowledge. If we take seriously what these carols say, I don't know why we would take seriously what these carols say in the way that you're implying anyway, because they don't have any authority really, apart from where they coincide with scripture or the tradition of the church or something like that. But in themselves, carols don't have any authority except where their doctrine coincides with Christian teaching. And it's not inevitable that that would be true. There are almost secular carols, really. So I don't think we particularly need to be taking carols seriously without an authority other than the songs themselves indicating that they're teaching sound doctrine. If we take seriously what these carols say, we ought to be looking with speechless amazement at every human face. I just think that's just such a bizarre thing to say. God thought this face was worth everything. God thought this person was worth everything. God thinks there is no gift or risk too great to bring full life to this person. And God thinks this person can reflect something of the massive generosity that is God's own act and nature. It is possibly the hardest thing in the Christian faith to accept or understand. That radical sense that wherever we turn, we see a humanity God has believed to be supremely worthwhile. Well, it's possibly the hardest thing in Christian faith to accept or understand. I don't think it is, you know. It might be the hardest thing for you to understand because you only see other people in terms of what they can give you and how they can further your agenda, and then you exterminate anyone who gets in your way. You trampled over countless people to get to the top, so to speak. Well, I hope it was worth the bother. Of course, day by day we make our little judgments and we take our sides. Oh, so you were making little judgments, were you? When you were slandering me all over the country and all over other countries as well, and in different Christian denominations, and approaching my employer and universities I was studying in, and having people move in next door to me and in the flat above me to make my life hell, really, and to try and entrap me. So you were just making little judgments and taking sides when you were trying to utterly destroy me. Is this how you're a sinner speaking to sinners, that you're just making little judgments when you're trying to enslave the whole world and kill most of us off and bring in a dictatorial one world government and undermine the organisation that paid you £750,000 to look after it? That was just one of your little judgments, was it? We think, unthinkingly, that such and such a life is less worthwhile than another. Well, this sounds like a confession, Rowan, so you really need to be using the first person singular and not the first person plural. We think the lives of our enemies are less worthwhile than the lives of our friends. Again, you know, change the pronoun here. You need the first person singular, not the first person plural. And while there are monumentally difficult decisions to make in our world, about the use of force, about defence and war and the like, well, this is disingenuous, isn't it, when you're working for the people who are causing all the wars? You use force to destroy other people and discredit them. Monumentally difficult decisions. You don't even make most of the decisions. You're told what to do. You're dangling on a thread. The one thing the Christian has to be sure of is that wherever we turn, the human life we see is a life as valuable as ours. And if our actions diminish or destroy it, that is nothing for triumph and everything for tragedy. Well, that's true, Rowan, but start acting like it. You see, because I can't hear the words that you're saying, because your actions are deafening me. Anyway, I'm going to leave it there because I've been ranting on for quite a while, as usual, which I can do now I've got new batteries. And a permanent high-speed internet connection to upload videos as long as I like. So, I will try and make you another video tomorrow, which I might talk a bit more about this bizarre lecture at St Paul's Cathedral, or I might talk about your even more bizarre article that was published today. But anyway, if not, I have got the video to end all videos in the pipeline, which is going to be your special Christmas present, so you've got that to look forward to. But don't forget, be alert. Hasta la próxima.
So the second question about how we keep a Christian Christmas is to ask some awkward questions about how we value human lives, how we value the lives immediately around us, how we value the lives that impact upon us in negative, dangerous and difficult ways, how we value the lives that appear not to be especially significant or effective or efficient. If we take seriously what these carols say, we ought to be looking with speechless amazement at every human face. God thought this face was worth everything. God thought this person was worth everything. God thought, God thinks, that there is no gift or risk too great to bring full life and joy to this person. And God thought and thinks that this person can reflect something of the massive generosity that is God's own act and nature. It's possibly the hardest thing in the Christian faith to accept or understand. That radical sense that wherever we turn, we see a humanity God has believed to be supremely worthwhile. Of course, day by day, we make our little judgments and we take our sides. We think unthinkingly that such and such a life is obviously less worthwhile than another. We think the lives of our enemies are less worthwhile than the lives of our friends. And while there are monumentally difficult decisions to make in our world about the use of force, about defense and war and the like, the one thing the Christian has to be sure of is that wherever we turn, the human life we see is a life as valuable as ours. And if our actions diminish or destroy it, that is nothing for triumph and all for tragedy.